A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
People thought he was going to commit to a total ethnic cleansing of the Kurdish regions to appease Turkey. But then, suddenly, he pivoted. He made these massive concessions regarding Kurdish language and culture. He is allowing Kurdish to be taught in schools and recognizing their local councils. Why the sudden shift from military aggression to cultural accommodation?
Because he realized he could not win a permanent insurgency in the north while also trying to rebuild Damascus. He chose the Turkish model, not the current Turkish model of confrontation, but a more transactional one. He is basically telling the Kurds, you can have your language and your local schools, but you have to accept the sovereignty of the Syrian state, and you have to kick out the militants that the Turks hate. It is all about consolidating power. He is willing to give up cultural control to gain political and territorial control. It is the same logic he is applying to Israel.
It is the same logic. He is willing to accept a 15-kilometer buffer zone and an Israeli presence in the south if it means he can get the United States to lift sanctions and remove his terrorist designation. He wants to be seen as the man who stabilized Syria, and if that requires a few uncomfortable compromises with the Zionist entity, as they used to call us, he is clearly willing to make them.
And the United States is playing a huge role in this. The current administration has been very clear that their priority is the total containment of Iran. They see Al-Sharaa as the most effective tool they have for that. So, they are acting as the primary mediator in these Paris talks. They are the ones whispering in Al-Sharaa's ear, telling him that if he keeps the border quiet and keeps the Iranians out, the money will start flowing for reconstruction. There is even talk of a Syria Stabilization Act of 2026 being drafted in Washington right now.
It is a high-stakes gamble for us, though. We are essentially betting that a former al-Qaeda leader can be a reliable regional partner. If we are wrong, we have essentially helped a sophisticated jihadi build a modern state right on our doorstep. But if we are right, we have fundamentally broken the Shiite crescent and created a Sunni majority neighbor that is more interested in business than in holy war.
You know, it reminds me of what we discussed back in episode 928 regarding the Abraham Accords. There was always this question of whether the Accords could survive a major regional shift. What we are seeing now is the potential for an Abraham Accords 2.0, but with a country that was actually a frontline enemy. If Syria eventually joins that framework, the entire geopolitical architecture of the last 80 years is gone.
It is a massive shift in the threat calculus. For 40 years, the threat was a state-to-state war with a massive Syrian tank army backed by Soviet or Russian hardware. Then it became a threat of asymmetric warfare from Iranian proxies like Hezbollah. Now the threat is something else entirely. It is the threat of an unstable post-jihadist state that could implode or pivot back to radicalism at any moment. That is why the buffer zone is so critical. It is not just about stopping tanks. It is about creating a physical barrier against uncertainty.
And I think we need to talk about the technical mechanics of that barrier a bit more, because it really represents a shift in how Israel thinks about its security. In the past, we relied on the concept of deterrence, the idea that if they hit us, we would hit them back 10 times harder. But deterrence failed on October 7th. The new doctrine is about denial. We are not trying to convince them not to attack. We are making it physically impossible for them to succeed if they do.
Right. The 20-mile trench is a perfect example. You cannot just drive a truck full of militants over a 15-foot deep trench. You need bridge-laying equipment. You need engineering units. You need a level of military sophistication that a militia simply does not have. By forcing any potential attacker to use heavy equipment, you make them visible to air power. You turn a fast-moving raid into a slow-moving target.
Precisely. And by holding that 15 kilometers, we have moved our own artillery and sensors deep enough into Syria that we can see deep into their hinterland. We can see them coming long before they get to the trench. It is a layered defense that is much more resilient than a single fence line. But the risk, of course, is mission creep. We have seen this before in Lebanon in 1982. You go in for a buffer zone, and 20 years later you are still there, and the local population has turned against you.
That is the big danger. Right now, the local Druze and the villagers in the south might be okay with the Israeli presence because it provides security and jobs. But how long does that last? Eventually, the nationalist sentiment that Al-Sharaa is cultivating in Damascus will filter down to the south. If we do not have an exit strategy, or at least a very clear plan for how to transition that buffer zone into some kind of joint security arrangement, we are just setting ourselves up for the next conflict.
Which is why the role of the Syrian foreign minister, Assad al-Shaibani, is so important to watch. He is the one who has to sell this to the Syrian public and the Arab world. If you listen to his speeches lately, he is using this very specific language about the restoration of Syrian sovereignty in stages. He is setting the expectation that the Israelis will leave eventually, but only once the Syrian army is strong enough to guarantee the security of the border themselves. It is a clever way to frame it. He is not saying he accepts the occupation. He is saying he is outsmarting the Israelis by letting them do the hard work while he builds up his strength.
It is a delicate dance. And meanwhile, you have the internal dynamics of the Syrian government. You mentioned Hussein Salama, the intelligence chief. He is the one who really runs the security apparatus. He is a hard man, a former commander who has a lot of blood on his hands. If he and Al-Sharaa ever have a falling out, or if Salama decides that the pivot to the west is not working, this whole house of cards could come crashing down.
That is why I am always looking at the economic data. If you want to know if Al-Sharaa is serious, look at where the money is going.
And that zone is likely to be there for a very long time. Second, we have to watch the diplomatic track in Paris. If those talks move from deconfliction to actual trade or some form of low-level diplomatic recognition, it will be the biggest story in the region for a decade.
It could make him the only leader who has the domestic political capital to actually sign a long-term peace deal, or it could be the thing that eventually forces him back into a confrontation to prove his nationalist bona fides. It is security through engineering and diplomacy, rather than just raw firepower. It is a more mature, if more complicated, way of looking at the world, and honestly, it is the only way forward.
Well, it certainly fits the name of the show. If this isn't a weird prompt, I don't know what is. A former Al-Qaeda leader becoming a regional partner while we occupy a 15-kilometer strip of his country. You couldn't make this up.
You really couldn't. And that is why we do this, right? To try and make sense of the things that don't seem to make sense. It really does. And if you want to see the full archive of our episodes, all 1111 of them now, head over to myweirdprompts.com.
Also, if you are on Telegram, search for My Weird Prompts. We have a channel there that posts every time a new episode drops, so you will never miss a deep dive. We are living in a world that is changing faster than the maps can be printed, and we are going to keep trying to stay one step ahead of it.
Thanks for joining us today. This has been a fascinating one. I think I'm going to go back and reread some of those transcripts from the Paris talks. There's always something hidden in the subtext. Until next time, stay curious.
Hey Herman, before we go, I was just thinking about that point you made about the Gulf investment. Do you think there is any chance that Syria actually joins the Abraham Accords in our lifetime? I mean, it seems impossible, but then again, everything we talked about today seemed impossible 2 years ago.
It is the ultimate long shot corn. But look at the pattern. The Accords are about two things: economic integration and a shared security architecture against Iran. Al-Sharaa is already doing the second part. He is actively working against Iranian interests because they are a threat to his own sovereignty.
It would be the ultimate irony. The country that was once the beating heart of Arab nationalism and the loudest voice against normalization, led by a man who was once the most radical of radicals, becoming the final piece of the normalization puzzle.
The Middle East has a funny way of making ironies into realities. We saw it with Egypt in the 70s, we saw it with the Emirates in 2020, and we might be seeing the beginning of it now in Damascus.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks again for the deep dive, Herman. And thanks to all of you for listening. This has been My Weird Prompts, a human AI collaboration. We will catch you on the next one.
Take care, everyone.
One last thing, Herman. Did you see the report about the new school curriculum in Damascus? They are apparently removing some of the more, let's say, aggressive anti-Israel rhetoric from the textbooks. It is subtle, but it is there.
I did see that. They are moving toward a more historical grievance model rather than an active incitement model. It is a small step, but in this part of the world, those small steps are everything. It shows that Al-Sharaa is thinking about the next generation and how to prepare them for a world where Israel is a permanent neighbor rather than a temporary enemy.
It's the long game. Always the long game. All right, now we really are done. Go get some coffee, Herman. You've earned it.
I think I'll do that. See you at home, Corn.
See you there. Thanks for listening to My Weird Prompts. Check out the website at myweirdprompts.com for more. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.
Actually, Herman, I just remembered one more thing. Do you think the U.S. is going to keep their troops in the east now that Al-Sharaa is consolidating?
That's a whole other episode, Corn. Let's save the oil fields and the Kurdish-Turkish-American triangle for next week.
Fair enough. Too much for one day. Signing off for real now.
For real this time. Bye, everyone.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the flows from sloth.